So welcome all. We are extremely pleased to be hosting once again Dr. Soumitra Basu, who will share with us the Aurobindonian perspective on chakras. This is a new topic for new perspectives, so we are very much looking forward to his talk this morning. And I'm Rade from the LaGrasse Center, Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center in Fountain Inn, South Carolina, and I'm joined by H.P. Rama and, of course, our guest speaker, Dr. Basu. Vladimir Yatsenko, also with our center, will be joining shortly. So before beginning today's session, let us come together in a few moments of silence. So Sri Aurobindo acknowledges the system of numerous channels in the body that is referred to as nadi, in which the centers or lotuses, also referred to as chakras, rise in an ascending scale to the summit, he states, where there is 1,000-petaled lotus from which all mental and vital energy flows. And Sri Aurobindo also says that each of these chakras is a storing house of its own particular system of psychological powers, energies, and operations, each system corresponding to a plane of our psychological existence. And so today, Dr. Soumitra Basu, a psychiatrist working with consciousness paradigms, will discuss the chakra system, its corresponding planes of being and consciousness, and its role in integral yoga. And as always, questions will be addressed by him towards the end of the hour, so at any time, please post your questions in the Q&A box rather than the chat. And with that, Dr. Basu, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Rade, and thank you, Rade Center, for inviting me to speak on a very important and special topic. Special because though chakras are known since antiquity, but Sri Aurobindo has given an entirely new orientation to the whole thing, an entirely new view, which was never seen in that light earlier. So this is interesting. This is very interesting. And then we'll be sharing a PowerPoint presentation. So then some of these things will become a bit clearer to you, because it is a difficult topic, because we'll be also discussing what are the chakras, which is also a little bit difficult to understand, that what are actually the chakras. Are the ganglia in the body? Are there centers in the physical body? Or there are subtle things which you cannot correspond with the centers? And all that, and all Sri Aurobindo explains. But most important of what Sri Aurobindo explains is that though the chakras open from below upwards, which has always been the traditional way of viewing the whole thing, Sri Aurobindo brings in a different perspective of having the chakras open from a different direction, from above downwards, not from below upwards, from above downwards. And we'll explain why he does that. So he does it in an absolutely different way. And you don't have to undergo that tedious and very strict training which you need when you start from below upwards. So that is very rigorous, a very hard work, and then Sri Aurobindo dispenses with all that. And in Sri Aurobindo's system, if you work through Sri Aurobindo's system, if you work through how the consciousness descends, then you will be surprised to find that when actually the higher power descends, it works on you regardless of whether you are aware of the chakras in you or not. So even if you are not aware of the chakras functioning in your body, the chakras will automatically open to the power that is descending from above. And this is a grace which Sri Aurobindo has given to us. But before that, we'll talk about what are the what actually is the chakra, what actually is the chakra, and for that a little bit of background is necessary. Um, we had done these sessions before where we have said that the um, being, I don't call, when I describe a particular Homo sapiens as a personality, I would call it as a being, because Sri Aurobindo views that every being has a dimension of personality and has a dimension of impersonality. So better to call it as a being. So we have an outer being, but Sri Aurobindo says that the outer being is not the whole thing, because we are not only our gross outer being, we are not only our gross body, we also have a subtle consciousness, we have subtle forces acting on us, of which we are not aware. And the subtle forces, it is we are not aware of those subtle forces, because it is as it is, the gross body will not be able to bear the action of the subtle forces unless it is given to us in a very regulated way, as far as the body can receive it. That is why it is very difficult for us to understand it. And in this regard, Sri Aurobindo explains that our outer being, which is described in psychology as surface personality, what is studied as personality in modern psychology is considered by Sri Aurobindo to be the outer being or the surface personality, and behind it is an inner being. And this inner being is in connection with the cosmic consciousness. The inner being has an inner mind, it has an inner vital, it has an inner physical, and it is connected with the cosmic consciousness. It goes above to the superconscious, it sinks down into the inconscious. And this inner being is also supported from behind by an inmost being, which is the soul space. But the soul, you remember, the soul space is different. The inner being is part of nature, but the soul space is different. It is not part of nature. It is the what you call it is the direct descendant of the Sat, or the existential aspect of Satchidananda. So it's different. So it's where the Purusha resides, and the rest is the nature. And so in between the inner being and the outer being, in between the inner being and the outer being, there are channels of communication. There are channels of communication between the inner being and the outer being. So from the cosmic consciousness, things enter, forces, vibrations, waves, influences, they enter into our inner being. From our inner being, they enter our outer being through channels, and these channels are mostly half closed. They are not fully open. And Sri Aurobindo says that from the cosmic consciousness, whatever comes into the inner being, everything doesn't come into the outer being. Something trickles in, because the channels are half closed or partially closed. So something trickles in. And then he says, even that trickle that comes is responsible for our great productions, our creativity, our art, literature, and all of our creative things. Even that little trickle that comes. Now, these channels of communication between the inner being and the outer being, which are actually located in the inner being, these channels are located in the inner being, and they are connecting with the inner being and the outer being, connecting with the outer being. These channels are what we call as the chakras. The chakras are these channels of communication between the inner being and the outer being, and they're mostly half open. And the point is that we have to see that how we can open up. But the opening up is risky. Opening up is very risky. Risky why? Because from the cosmic consciousness, when things come inside the inner being and they go to the outer being, then the outer being might not receive the whole thing in full, because the outer being is limited. The outer being or our outer personality has limitations. So it cannot hold the unlimited. The cosmic consciousness is unlimited. It cannot hold it. And then in the cosmic consciousness, there are great negative waves also. There are great positive waves. There are great negative waves. They can also enter through these chakras into your outer personality. And if you have not worked on your ego, if you have not worked on the unconscious, on your inconscious, if you have not activated the soul behind, the psychic being behind, or the antaratma behind, if you have not done all these things, then you can be overwhelmed by the negative forces that are coming. You can succumb and you can actually get deviated from the path. And that is what happened to the traditional path. That is what happened, because when things came, they were not being able to receive it fully, or even when the negative forces came, they were not being able to handle it every time, because these other things were not done. It is not in isolation that you can have one thing. In an integral movement, you have to work simultaneously in different parts. So you see that we are talking, Shobit is talking about an integral movement. In an integral movement, everything is equally important. So this is the beauty of Sri Aurobindo's vision. Why I'm telling you this? Because we have to understand why Tantra degenerated after some time, because there was the absence of good guides. You see that the whole path from below upwards, you need very good guides, very precision work, very precisive work is there, and you have to do it step by step, very meticulously. Otherwise, you have this risk of being overwhelmed by all these things that come from the cosmic consciousness. They enter through the chakras, and there is a disruptive effect because you have not worked on your ego. You have not worked on the unconscious, from where things can come and upset everything, upset the apple cart. And you have not worked on your ego or on your soul. So all these things taken together, you see the risk is there when you are traveling from below upwards, opening up the chakras one by one. But we'll come to it. We'll come to it. We'll go to screen sharing, and then we'll come to this. Before then, what Sri Aurobindo answers and what solution he gives? He gives a different solution. He understands the whole thing from a different perspective, from an integral perspective, and he gives a different solution, which is very remarkable. And you can say that why anybody has not given their solution before. That is also very interesting. Why? That will also come to that. So So this is what we were talking, that chakras are located in the inner being. That means they are not located in the outer personality, that or in the outer being, or in our physical consciousness, because we try to find what we call correlates inside our outer being. We think that the chakras correspond to our ganglia or nerve complexes and all that. But chakras are not like that. They are located in the inner being. They are located in the subtle dimension. And they are the channels of communication between the inner and the outer beings. And this inner being is not supported by the ego. That means if you have to understand the chakras, you have to transcend your ego. And we discussed this, that it is a link between the cosmic consciousness and individual consciousness. And these channels are partly open or closed. A trickle of cosmic forces are responsible for great creative work. So mostly these chakras, the channels that are representing the chakras are closed, and the work of activating the chakras is actually work of activating the channels so that we can receive the cosmic consciousness in a greater way than we can do it with our limited outer beings. Now, what are the chakras? What are the chakras? That is interesting. As you see, we have done this in previous programs in New Perspectives, the program on understanding what is the descent of consciousness. So I will not go into full details, just to remind you that the supreme consciousness descends from above, and the supreme consciousness has been described as Sat Chit Ananda, and Sri Aurobindo modified Chit to call it Chit Shakti, a consciousness force, and Shat is the existential aspect. So Shat descends and becomes the spirit, the soul essence, and the Chit Shakti descends to form the place of consciousness, and during involution and evolution. Now, those of you who are not acquainted with the terms involution and evolution, just a little bit I will tell you that evolution occurs from below, from the material inconscious, evolution starts occurring. But Sri Aurobindo explains that nothing can evolve from a vacuum. Whatever is evolving has been involved before in the inconscious as a potentiality. So nothing is evolving from a vacuum, from a zero. Whatever is being evolving has been involved before. It is involved in the inconscious as a potentiality, but it is dying dormant there. In the evolution, it will, from the dormancy, it will come to the active state. And this descent was described by Sri Aurobindo in a very interesting way. He called it involution, which is the opposite of evolution. Where the supreme power consciousness descended. And while it was descending, it was not descending in a very haphazard way. It was not descending in what we call in a chaotic way. It was descending in a very methodical way. And while it was descending, it was creating planes of consciousness, creating planes of the mind, the planes of the life energy, the planes of the higher faculties. But we don't know them. Why don't we know them? Because these planes that are descending from above, they do not have matter as the starting point. Because they do not have matter as the starting point, we can't understand them or we can't perceive them by our material senses. Our material senses can only understand those things or perceive those things that has matter as a starting point, because our senses are material. With non-material things, you cannot understand with your senses. You have to develop your inner senses. And these evolutionary planes, you see, they run parallel to our evolutionary planes. So we have our matter, life, mind, and our higher faculties. And just parallel to it are the evolutionary, the great planes of the life energy, the planes of the mind, the planes of the material energy. Even below that, there are material, what you call submaterial energies, and below, above the mind, there are what you call supracognitive planes also. So all these things are arranged in a hierarchy. And then when our evolution is occurring, there are two forces that are helping. One is the push from below. And then from the corresponding parallel planes, something is also coming and influencing. You see, two forces are also always acting. This is Sri Aurobindo's description of the evolution of consciousness. Mind you, I'm not talking about the Darwinian evolution of the physical consciousness like that. I'm of the species. I'm talking about the evolution of consciousness. And in the evolution of consciousness, something is being pushed from below and something comes from the side, from these corresponding planes which are there arranged hierarchically. So that is a separate thing. If you are interested, we have in our new perspectives, we have these PowerPoint presentations in our previous sessions where we have talked about involution and evolution. You can go there and you can check it. Now this, what you call, these involutionary planes and these evolutionary planes, they have their correspondences. These involutionary planes, or these planes which are already there before the evolution starts, they throw vortices of consciousness force. They throw holes of energy, and these holes of energies, they, or what you call, they crystallize into two things. With channels of subtle channels which will be carrying the subtle energies. These subtle energies, they are energies which you cannot understand physically with the physical senses. These subtle energies are being carried through the subtle channels which are called the nadis. And these are like relay centers, or the chakras are like relay centers which are modulating these energies. So as much it will transmit, as much the material body can receive it. So material body cannot receive all the energy that is there in the cosmic consciousness. We'll go wild, we'll go disrupted, we'll go mad if we can get it like that without preparing ourselves. So the chakras are always they are regulating. So they are like relay centers or regulating centers. So they are, therefore, the consciousness, while it was descending and producing involutionary planes, they were the involutionary planes which are running parallel to the evolutionary planes. These involutionary planes are throwing vortices of consciousness force, holes of energy, and this subtle energy is being transmitted to our outer gross personality, our gross being, through subtle channels. And these subtle channels are the nadis and these relay centers where the whole energies are regulated, so that how much we can receive, we can get it. They are the chakras. Now, this is important. Why? Because then, if you accept Sri Aurobindo's perspective, you see that chakras, you cannot relate with the physical centers like heart, navel, and all that. You cannot relate with that. But we related it. We say that the heart center is this, the heart chakra is this, the navel chakra is this, the throat chakra is this, the abdominal chakra is this, the sacral chakra is this. We identify. Why we identify? Then Sri Aurobindo explains, because the subtle body is interfused with the gross body. You see, to understand the subtle body and the gross body in a very discrete way is difficult. They are actually interfused with each other because we are being we feel it difficult to understand things. We can consider the subtle body is something different and the gross body is something which is totally unrelated to it. It is not like that. The gross body is penetrated wholly by the subtle body, and because it is penetrated wholly with the subtle body, there are certain correspondences, and Aurobindo says that is necessary, because if these correspondences were not there, Hatha Yoga would not have developed. Very specifically, he says this: the Hatha Yoga would not have developed if there were not correspondences. But that does not mean that we'll say that this heart, navel, and throat, they are actually the bearer, what you call, they are bearing the chakras, and they are responsible for the chakras there. It's not like that. It's just a correspondence. And also, that is an opinion that chakras can correspond to nerve ganglia. But Aurobindo says that there are centers in the physical body which the chakras correspond. There are actually centers in the physical body with which chakras can correspond in a more direct way. But these centers, you cannot equate them with the chakras. Now you see, this is all, this is, you know this, the correspondence of chakras with the planes of consciousness. This is the, in this Aurobindo's words, this is well known. In tradition, this is all well known. All these lotuses at the end of the spine, below the Muladhara, the lotus of the abdomen, from below upwards. I am speaking from below upwards. So at the end, we have the lotus of the spine, then the lotus of the abdomen, then the lotus of the navel, or the Navipaddha, lotus of the heart, which is the Anahata. And here there is a difference. Here there is a difference, because Aurobindo is not only concerned with the lotus of the heart, he is concerned with something else, something totally else, something which is not connected with the chakras like that, something which is in the soul space, something he called as the Antaratma, or the psychic being. Because I told you that the chakras are there in nature, not in the soul. Chakras are there in the nature, not in the soul. Don't confuse the chakras with the soul. And the soul space contains the psychic being at the level of the heart, which is different from the heart chakra. We'll come to that. Then you have the lotus in the throat, corresponding to the throat, corresponding to the forehead, and then you know that the 1,000-petal lotus at the head, or the chakra, which is representing the center of the higher will and knowledge. Now, as you see, these centers open from below up. We'll come to that. Opening from below up, I told you, is risky. What happened after some time when the centers were being opened from below up in disciplines like Tantra? What happened? After a certain point of time, expert guides were not there. And when expert guides were not there, this passage become very risky. This passage become very risky. And when the lower centers were activated, tremendous amount of physical and sexual energy was activated. But then you have to transcend that, and you have to go above. To transcend the activation of this physical and sexual energy unlimited, because you have not worked on the ego, you have not worked on your unconscious, you have not worked on your soul, then it is risky and you can fall down. And that is why Tantra became deviated. Even in that deviation, there were great things. If you tell me, if you see the erotic art in certain Indian temples like Khajuraho and Konaraka, from which plane of consciousness this erotic art came? It came when the consciousness got more or less consolidated in the lower centers, especially in the lower vital, higher vital centers. When they got consolidated, they couldn't move further. The more consolidation was there, and lesser consolidation in the other planes, more what you call more skewed towards the vital centers. And that time these things, great things happened. But then this is a chaos, because not the erotic art. I'm talking about this phenomenon of rising from below to above. This could be chaotic. This could be disruptive. So Aurobindo describes something else, and this is what we have to understand. And we'll come at the end. We'll again discuss that. Before finishing it. The Aurobindo talks of a Mahakundalini, which is above. You see, the chakras open up, and the energy which is there coiled. The coiled energy kundalini, it goes up, it goes up, it goes up until it goes above the head, and at the head it is connected with the spiritual mind. It ends up with the spiritual mind, and from the spiritual mind, people go back. People go to the great void, or people go go to the Brahma, or people go have a great realization, and then they are not concerned about anything else. They are no longer concerned about the chakras below once they go up. But Sri Aurobindo talks about a Mahakundalini above. Why? Because his main job is transformation. And then why? There are many reasons why he has to work from above. One is that it is less risky, because it is more risky to go from below upwards. And then in the traditional way, when you are ascending from below up, as you progress upwards, you get detached from the centers below. So every center you activate, and then you go up, then you are already detached from the center below. And you go again up, again you get detached from the centers which you have crossed. So finally, when you go above yourself, then you have detached yourself from all centers, and then you are free, liberated to go to the Brahma, to the great void and all. But Sri Aurobindo is concerned with transforming the world. Sri Aurobindo is concerned with bringing that consciousness, super consciousness, into the earth. You see that those who are following the traditional method, when they went up from above, they went to the super conscious. They were no longer concerned with the consciousness in the earth. They were only concerned with the super conscious. They were happy with it. They were blessed with it. But Sri Aurobindo is concerned with the transformation. And Sri Aurobindo therefore is concerned that every center has to be activated to this fully extent and should not be forgotten. So this task of grounding the superconscious into the earth consciousness, it needed a different approach, and that approach was that descent of the transforming force. That Mahakundalini is actually the force of transformation. Why it was not done before? If you ask me, there is a simple solution. It did. Below upwards, there can be also a different thing that can come from above below. Why? Because this force of transformation was never investigated in our system, in our spiritual system. It was not known. This secret was not known, that you can come and transform the super, and you can bring down the super conscious into the earth consciousness. So that secret was not known. And then what is the force of transformation? The force of transformation that acts between the super conscious and our individual. That force of transformation, what is that? That is actually the mother's force. That is actually the mother's force. And to invoke the mother's force, you have to invoke the mother's force so that the transformation occurs, so that the power descends. So you have to invoke. That is a task that we have to do. We have to invoke that force, otherwise it will not come. To invoke that force, you cannot do it from the poise of nature. You have to do it from the poise of the soul. You see, and I said the chakras are there in nature. So from where will you do it? That's why Sri Aurobindo had to bring the psychic being into the picture, which is behind the heart center, because the psychic being is the poise of a soul. And from there, if you are consolidated in your psychic being, you can have this opportunity of invoking the divine, invoking the mother's grace, so that the force of transformation comes. And when it comes down, it will open the centers one by one. And what is the beauty? The beauty is that when the force of transformation descends, it works according to each person, each individual's need. So for me, center of the head and the center of the throat has to be first worked upon. For Radhe, might be the center of the heart has to be first worked upon. For Vladimir, might be the center of the abdomen has to be first worked upon. So that force will come and work on the centers that are needed for your individual progress. So it is not going to act in a way in which you think it will be better. It will act in its own way, in its own grammar, and that is, it will act according to the individual's need, because the higher force, the force of transformation, and because it has been invoked from the psychic being, it also has an intuition. It knows where to work. And when this force comes down in Sri Aurobindo's system, when this force of transformation comes down, if you invoke from the psychic being the force of transformation to come down, your chakras will be automatically activated, which are needed to be activated, even if you are not aware of them. You need not be aware of them. You can be aware of them, but you need not be aware of them also. Automatically, this work will be done. This is the grace of the mother. This is the grace that the divine has given to us, that even without your knowledge, even your conscious knowing, these things will be done in you in the same way as it would have been done if you had been conscious of it. So this is the beauty of this whole thing. So we'll go to these chakras one by one. So I'm using, because our time is limited, I will not speak out the whole thing, but afterwards I will give you the slides when you can go over and see. So each center I'm describing it. You have to see, Sri Aurobindo is concerned about the central truth of the chakras. He is not concerned about the details of everything. He is concerned only of the central truth of the chakras. So, see, Sri Aurobindo's focus is on the central truth of chakras without subject to the old forms and symbols. So he is not interested in the old forms and symbols, number of petals or number of the color of the chakras and all that. He is not concerned with that. He is just concerned with the essence. What is the meaning of the plane of consciousness which is being activated by the chakras? And he beautifully explains it in Savitri. So this is from Savitri, that he talks about the physical consciousness, the Muladhara, the lowest center, that in the deep place where once the serpent slept, there came a grip on matter's giant powers for large utilities in life's little space. A firm ground was made for heaven's descending might. You see, it is this chakra at the base of the spine it is enmeshed in our physical consciousness, which is connected with the earth, where the Kundalini Shakti is waiting there. And this is very important. In Sri Aurobindo's parlance, this activation of this physical consciousness at this level is very important, not only for our physical well-being, but because the physical consciousness has to receive the superconscious force. It has to bear the transformation force. Because the physical consciousness, if it is not prepared, it will not be able to bear the force of transformation. So in our system, so then what you call the need becomes different and difficult. And that is why if you have to be conscious to be working on your Muladhara, you have to be conscious of your body consciousness. Not only about your body consciousness, I will request you that if you are really interested in working on your chakras and you are working on the lowest chakra, you should be not only be concerned about your body consciousness, but while in meditation, when you sit, you try to bring the light and project that light into your subconscious. Remember, the subconscious doesn't have a chakra. The subconscious is too vague to have a chakra. Because Sri Aurobindo says the subconscious is too vague. It doesn't have a chakra. And the superconscious doesn't have the embodied being, is not there in the superconscious. So there is no chakra above in the superconscious. There is no chakra below in the subconscious. But forces from the subconscious can destroy everything. So when you are sitting in meditation and you are really interested in working on this chakra, then you have to sometimes you have to sit, when you are sitting in meditation, you have to project the light downwards into your subconscious. Then the lower vital, Sri Aurobindo explains the Sadhisthana. Sri Aurobindo explains also very beautifully in a narrow nether center's petty purse, his childish game of daily dwarf desires was changed into a sweet and boisterous play, a romp of little gods with life in time. When the force descends, this will happen. What will happen? What will happen? Change into sweet and boisterous play. That means all our lower vital urges, all our what we call the lower vital is our repertoire of our libido energy. It has got our lustful passions, our passions are there. And it is not the Freudian way of sublimation. You see, change into a sweet and boisterous play. So it's not the Freudian way of sublimation. So you are having a mastery over your basal instincts by being connected at that level with the corresponding what you call level of cosmic consciousness. So the sublimation is actually occurring at a different place. It is occurring in the cosmic consciousness. So you are working with your petty desires, with your lusts and passions and all, not by sublimating them in the Freudian sense, but by linking them with the corresponding energies that are there in the cosmic consciousness. So, which means actually what means, those of you who are very interested in working in the lower vital chakra, that you have to connect the energies in your inner being at the level of your inner vital and your subtle physical. You see, there is an inner vital, you have a vital, and inside you have an inner vital, and there is an inner physical. And this junction of the inner vital and the inner physical, there you have to work, and at that level you have to connect it with the cosmic consciousness. Of course, you can use breath work or hatha yoga techniques to get connected with all these things. You can do it in a directly by working through your consciousness also. And real sublimation therefore occurs in the cosmic consciousness, not in the surface personality. So a time comes when your petty desires, they will fall off automatically from your being. Then the higher vital, then again Sri Aurobindo describes in the navel lotus's broad imperial range, its proud ambitions and master lusts, what tamed into instruments of a great come sway. So that happens when the force of transformation comes to do a work of God on earthly soil. So you see, Sri Aurobindo is meaning to work on the earthly soil. The traditional way of chakra was to leave. Once you have connected with the Manipur chakra, then you go up, then you are not connected with it anymore. You have left it. So you are not concerned with transforming the earth nature. But Sri Aurobindo is wanting to consolidate that in a higher poise in the earthly soil. So that is the difference. So so the concentration on the navel lotus gives the control and mastery over not only your passions, but on your mighty ambitions and dynamisms. No? Without this control, these same characteristics can get connected with the ego, which in turn gets magnified. So these are the things that are happening at that level of consciousness. You have your ambitions, your dynamisms, your passions, and if these are not controlled, they can get connected with the ego. But here, if you can bring the silence and peace in the center, then one can be dynamic without the negative effects of dynamism. You can be dynamic without falling prey to stress. So you can be dynamic in a different sense. And that dynamism actually can lead to the unmotivated bliss. So it's different. So personal work at the higher vital, again, these are all, I've given it in details, which afterwards you can go over the slides and see. It needs the this pranamaya purush at this level. If you are working at this level, you can come into contact with the pranamaya purush or the true vital being, which is difficult. I would say sometimes it is more difficult than even getting access to the psychic being, because the psychic being, with the mother's grace, you can have an access to it, because at the present moment the mother's grace is working on the psychic being. And though the pranamaya purush is another poise of the psychic being, it's not disconnected with the psychic being, but it's a special poise of the psychic being. But it is something where you have to have access to it. You have to have perfect silence and perfect mastery over your things at that level of the higher vital. You have to invoke the silence, quietude, and peace in a very solid, extremely solid way. So you can start doing that by checking your impulse to react. No? Today, social media gives you an opportunity. So those of you who are wanting to work at the higher vital, I would say stop reacting at any instance when you're there with your Facebook and all the social media things. Don't react. Start with that. You have an easy access nowadays, easy feed for preparation. And you have to rise above the sense of time urgency, because at the problem here, at this personal work, at this problem at the higher level of the higher vital is because we are competing with one thing with which we should not compete. It's foolish to compete. We are competing with time. In modern corporate age, we are always competing with time. Time. Deadline is time. But that is actually the timeless. With the higher vital, you are working at this chakra, then you have to be connected with the timeless zone. And then working with time will not make you stressed, will not make you having the pitfalls of the type A personality. You know the type A personality, the corporate personality, who becomes ischemic at the level of the heart 10 years before the normal population, because they are having a high sense of time urgency. So you can use this. You can widen your inner being. You can use many exercises. I've given an exercise which you can use. There is a poem by Sri Aurobindo called Ocean Wideness. It's a very beautiful poem. If you meditate on that poem and follow its movement, then you, especially the second stanza of that poem, then you can identify yourself with the personal work at this level. So then here the heart lotus again is different. It's a different ball game together. Now again, Sri Aurobindo describes the heart lotus, the action here. In the kingdom of the lotus of the heart, love, chanting its pure hymeneal hymn, made life and body mirrors of sacred joy, and all the emotions gave themselves to God. So this is what happens when the force of transformation comes, that in the kingdom of the lotus of the heart, love, chanting its pure hymeneal hymn, made life and body mirrors of sacred joy, and all the emotions gave themselves to God. Now, what does that mean? It means that the work of the heart chakra, Shivan is describing the work of the heart chakra, and what is there? It is purifying love by detaching love from the its because the roots of the love has got its roots or got its moorings in the physical, in the ego, in the vital, in the mind. So the heart chakra is actually freeing love from these attachments to the outer body, from the outer being. Now, love, our love, we have all our problems with our love because of our love at the level of the outer being is hooked to all these things. It is hooked to the ego. It is hooked to our mind with our preferential treatments. It is hooked to our vital with our passions there. It is hooked to our body with the body's demands on love. And all these things, the heart chakra is detaching love. Heart chakra is detaching love from these moorings and connecting it with the universal love. The heart chakra, what a great work it is doing. Where the level of the heart chakra, love is being purified by detaching love from all the impurities and linking it with the universal love. And this is how the great, our great, our four leaders, the men of God, or whether it is Christ, whether it is Buddha, knowingly or unknowingly, whether they were aware of it or not, is not is a different thing. But this is how they have brought down the concept of universal love, universal compassion by purifying love. But for Sri Aurobindo, this is not enough. Very, very beautiful, a very beautiful orientation which Sri Aurobindo gives. For Sri Aurobindo, this is also not enough. He has to have something else. Always he is new, and he has to have something else here. What is that? He talks about the psychic being which is behind the heart chakra, and in your system where we are working with the chakras, you have actually also, more importantly, you have to work on the psychic being. What is why? Because when you go to the psychic being, you see, this is at the heart center where we were talking before, that love, which is restrained by physical, vital, and mental influences. And when you move to your inner being, then love can get detached from these influences and get connected with the universal love. So this is how universal love can be what you call experienced. Because universal love is different from love which we understand in personal terms. Very difficult otherwise to understand what is universal love. In Christianity, that to make people understand what is universal love, then what had to be shown was that universal love is something which can bear the greatest suffering that is possible, the greatest suffering that is possible, and that the greatest suffering was the suffering on the cross. That is why the crucifixion became so important. And so that was the way to salvation. Because unless you had given that symbol to people, that look, this is universal love. Universal love is something which can contain in its matrix the greatest possible suffering, that the divine body is being nailed, is being hammered. What suffering, what extreme suffering can be beyond that? So that is how the universal love had to be communicated to people. People would not have understood what is universal love. Buddha had to bring it through his compassion. But Sri Aurobindo then is not only satisfied with this, because this has also, at a certain point, it has its limitations. So then he is concerned with the psychic being. And the psychic being is in the soul, is actually a poise of the soul, which is a projection of the Jivatma in the manifestation. The Jivatma is beyond the manifestation, and it projects the psychic being or the Antaratma or the Chaitanya Purush in the manifestation. And because the psychic being has come from the Atma, it has descended from the Satchidananda Sat, the Sat of Satchidananda. Ultimately, it has descended from there. It has not come from the inconscious. You see, our love in our outer being has come from the inconscious. So that way, it has got all impurities there. The inconscious has got impurities, and love that is in us, which we experience as love, has come from the inconscious, and therefore we have to purify it by detaching it from the vital mind and the physical and the ego and linking with the universal love. But the psychic being is pure. It is totally pure because it has descended from above. It has descended from above. What a great thing. And this thing which has descended from above, no stain of impurity is there. No stain of inconscience is there. Therefore, from there only, if you are poised there, you can integrate everything around yourself, and you can invoke the divine, you can invoke the Mother's grace so that you can descend and work on you. You can do it only from a center which is intrinsically pure, So, and it is representing purest love and unalloyed bliss. So this is, it can only connect you with the transcendent. So if the psychic being comes forward, it can also replace the ego, and it can become the master of our life. The psychic being is the most important thing when we talk about sharing the system of chakras, because sharing the system of chakras is not dependent only on the outer chakras. The central truth of the chakras only becomes relevant in a very different way, in a way in which he wants, because he is a yoga of transformation. In that, the psychic being is very important. And unless the psychic being is consolidated, you cannot invoke the divine from above to come down and open the centers in the way which Sri Aurobindo wants. So if you are interested in chakras, and at the same time you are interested in Sri Aurobindo, the central thing that you have to do is to first get consolidated in the consciousness of your psychic being. That is very important. Then we come to this throat chakra, external mind. Look how Sri Aurobindo describes it in the passage of the lotus of the throat, where speech must arise and the expressing mind and the heart's impulse run towards word and act. A glad uplift and a new working came. So life now obeyed to a diviner rule, and every act became an act of God. You see, this is showing that what is the necessity of harnessing our speech, our emotional upheavals, and our impulsive acts. Concentration at the throat center is needed to not to become a good orator. You see, concentration of the throat chakra is not needed to become a great orator or a great speaker, but to allow the silence and peace to listen and consolidate there. Then something new will come. What is that? You know the exact words to be spoken. You know the exact moment where your impulses have to be checked. You know the exact words to be spoken. Exact words. That is enough. A few words will be enough, which you had otherwise needed many words to express. A few words can be enough. So in the working on the third chakra is not increasing your oratorial faculties. It's not like that. So it is building a foundation of silence from where a meaningful speech can arise. Your speech has to be meaningful. The sound has to be meaningful. Also the sound, the vibration of your speech, that also has to be very beautiful. So there are two movements which are converging in the silence when you are working on the external mind. Firstly, and the idea that you want to express gets the exact words it needs for the correct expression, and then a sudden impulsive emotion doesn't disrupt what you're wanting to say. So you can practice this by taking some time to introspect before you start speaking, and then you can reach a state of spontaneity when silence can automatically receive and transmit the exact words to be spoken, and now the quality of the sounds emitted change, so that they can carry a power that is effective, and they can carry a vibration of pleasantness. So that is why vocal music was shaped by beings who had worked on their own consciousness. You see, vocal music, great vocal musicians, and they had worked on their own consciousness, and that is why they came with great vocal music. And also you see the verbal pronunciation of Om or a dynamic mantra. What a galvanic effect it has on life, not only of Om, but also the mantras that are given during initiation in different systems. Why they have a galvanizing effect? Because because they have come to that level of consciousness which is represented by the external mind in a very different way than when we speak at random. What we speak, we don't know what we speak at random. We speak sometimes things which are not in consonance with our inner being. Remember, there were many people who went and told the mother that we want to die and make us die nicely, peacefully, so that we have a nice death. And she prepared that so that they could have a nice death. And afterwards, she said that when she made these beings after death, that what they wanted to die, that there was nothing in it. There was no truth in it. It was not the inner beings want. It was just an external way of saying that I want to die. So you see, unless you are working at this level, your words will not express what is actually inside you. They will only express outer things. And this is a plane of will or the plane of vision. And you see, Sri Aurobindo has given such importance to this plane. By that simple word, you will see in the castle of the lotus twixt the brows. The symbol of the castle. He's giving the symbol of the castle, the palace. The lotus is situated there in the palace. The consciousness is actually in the palace. But that means it has a royalty. It is something which is royal. Whence it shoots the arrows of its sight and will. So the willpower has a royalty. Because without will, knowledge is important. Why he has used the symbol of the castle? Because without the royalty of will, your knowledge is important. So concentration at this center allows the individual will and the universal will to align with each other, which is very important. And the symbol of shooting arrow shows that the new alignment can reach beyond the mind. The new alignment can reach beyond the mind to bring in supracognitive things like intuition. You can bring. So you can unlock hidden secrets and have insights in disciplines like astrology. If you can align the individual will with the universal will, you can unlock many hidden secrets. Even if it is done with an intense mystic discipline, you can also will your time of death, which is called Ichamritu in the Indian tradition. So when you are concentrating at the individual will, don't do it just to strengthen your own universal will, but do it with the attitude of linking your individual will with the universal will. So when we are concentrating there between the eyebrows, we should better, instead of strengthening our own individual willpower, which has very limited value because we individuals are limited, it's much better that we link it with the universal will so that we become universal individuals. So now this Swami Vivekananda has given a very beautiful exercise, which at this level of this will. So he suggested that it is easier to imagine. He suggests an interesting exercise. So it is easier to imagine that the universe is a mirror where you are visualizing your body. Universe is a mirror where you are visualizing your body. So that is an exercise which is easy. Swami Vivekananda says you do the opposite. You reverse your stand. You make a formation that your individuality is a mirror. As an individual, you are a mirror, and that mirror is reflecting the whole universe. So your individuality is actually a mirror, and that mirror is reflecting the whole universe. It is difficult to do. The other one was more easy. When you see that the universe is a mirror and you are reflected in it. But you yourself are a mirror and the universe is reflected in you. Then only this is an exercise with which you can identify with your whole universe, which you can identify with the cosmic consciousness. And then you can identify with eternity also, so that you can become birthless and deathless in consciousness. So this is a beautiful exercise given by Swami Vivekananda. The plane of the higher will and knowledge. Aurobindo says, in the country of the lotus of the head, which thinking mind has made its busy space, because it is symbolizing a consolidation of the spiritual progress where consciousness and force are aligned with each other, wisdom and energy are aligned with each other. So one is no longer limited to one's limited cognitive space, but opens to the cosmic space. So you are here, opening up from your limited cognitive space to the cosmic space, which is infinite, because this higher vision knowledge is important. This in Aurobindo's paradigm, our suffering in the world today at the individual and the global, at the corporate, at the social, at the national and the political level, everywhere, mainly is because there is a great hiatus between knowledge and will. That it can be a great knowledgeable person, but he might not have the willpower to execute his knowledge. Or there can be a person with great energy, but he doesn't have the adequate knowledge to back his energy. The bringing together of knowledge and will, you start when you work at this level of consciousness, which is there, the Sahasradal. When you go there, then you start working by beginning to align this. Of course, this alignment is difficult. Perfect alignment will be happening at the level of the supermind, far, far above. But you have to begin somewhere, and this is the place where you begin. So one can start by widening the consciousness above the head, invoking the silence and vastness of the infinite, so that it becomes not really endless. And once this plane is consolidated, you can receive a pure idea that can act as an inspiration, that may not need words for formulation. So this is a very important plane where actually you start working to align the will and knowledge, which is going actually to change the world. And behind all reigns the sovereign deathless soul, which this Aurobindo ends the description by this, because he is emphasizing that the chakras are situated in the inner being, which is separate from the soul space. So that's why he has said, behind all render sovereign deathless soul, that you should not confuse the chakras with the soul, but what you call So to go to the soul, you have to do a lot of work. You have to transcend your ego, and if unless because your ego is not transcended, then your activation of the centers of dynamism, which are the chakras, would be would lead to nowhere, or could lead to chaos. Now, this is what we had described, that the conventional systems of yoga described how the universal energy is in communion with the individual energy. The individual energy, and there are, you see, there are special breathing techniques, which, because I told you that these subtle centers are there. We are not going into the details. The subtle centers are there, but mainly what you see, that the Kundalini is the energy which is coiled down below, which has to come up, and it has to come up to the subtle centers. The nadis are subtle channels, and the chakras are going to regulate that. All this subtle system is there inside our whole what you call our whole structure, because our whole structure has not only our outer being, it has our inner being, and it has an inmost being. So inside the whole structure, the whole what you call the hierarchy of our structure, you have all these things there, these subtle channels and all these, which are actually the connections between the subtle and the gross. This is the conventional way. And sure, in the system, the initiation takes place directly in the soul space, in the inmost soul principle of the psychic being that is activated. And when it opens to the higher consciousness, it facilitates its descent and gently open the chakras that are needed for the individual. Now, this is interesting. It gently opens the chakras. The older system, the chakras had to be opened with great amount of effort had to be given. Great amount of effort had to be given to open the chakras. In Aurobindo system, when it comes from above down, the chakras open automatically, very beautifully, delicately, and you don't have that. When you don't have that excessive gross energy, you don't need that, because it is done behind the scenes. So instead of an excessive concentration of the lotuses, the wheeled projections of the pranic energy aided mechanically by breathing techniques, which people do, we do it in a different way. So, and ultimately, in Shivam, the system, these channels between the outer and the inner beings open up and can even lead to the fusion of the inner being and the outer being. When the inner being and the outer being fuse together, then only the ego can be replaced by the psychic being. You see, the inner being and the outer being have to fuse together. When the psychic being comes forward, the beauty of the psychic being is that when the psychic being comes forward, it not only does its own work, it does the work of the heart chakra. I told you that the work of the heart chakra was what? To delink the love, your love, our love, from the attachments to the physical, vital, mental, and the ego. But the psychic being comes forward, it will do that work automatically. So you concentrate on the psychic being, it is coming down above, from above, being in the pure peace and the joy and unalloyed bliss, and it is coming forward. It is also automatically doing the work of the heart chakra. The awakening of the Kundalini in the traditional Tantra became extremely arduous and risky, with a gradual non-availability of external guides. The awakening of the psychic being in the integral paradigm of Sri Aurobindo is significant, because the psychic being itself can act as the inner guide and facilitate the descent of transformation. This is the last slide. As a result, the unleashed ascending forces of consciousness activated by the chakras can rise above and widen into the consciousness and the universal self. That means when the power is descending, something is released which also go up. You see, it is not that in Shivan the system only descent is there. Something is not ascending. Something, when it is descending, it is releasing forces which also go up. And they go up to do a greater work, to widen into the cosmic consciousness and the universal self. The consciousness can rise further up, and using the chakras of the head as its base, it can finally consolidate itself into a spiritual person. And afterwards, we'll talk about the spiritual person merging into the supramental being. There's a different thing. And remember, the psychic being will also be a template. The psychic being will also be a template of the supramental being, or the new evolutionary Gnostic being that is going to come and replace the human being. So I think we have slide finishes and also the time finishes, and I give to Radhe to continue. Yes.
Sure. And we do, I know we are at time, but if your time permits, Dr. Basu, we would like to at least have you address a few of the questions in the Q&A box there, which you can open and maybe glance through and see if there's a few there that you can address, or we can read them for you.
Soumitra, would you like to read? I can
think
read.
Yes,
You
you
can
can read
read.
also.
Yeah, please, you choose your questions which you would like to answer.
So this, you can read it. You can read it for me. Then
Okay.
everybody can hear.
Yes, it's yeah. So if if the energy comes from the top chakra down due to the grace, and we haven't worked out our ego and other aspects that we need to work out, how does that affect the body and the vital?
Yes, it can be disruptive. You can fall. In fact, in our book, in consciousness-based psychology, we have discussed this and spiritual emergencies. So this is something that if it is half done, and then you can land up in trouble. Oh, in which volume I can read more about the chakras? This is very interesting. Sri Aurobindo has only, you see, because he was concerned about the central truth of the chakras, he has given numerous answers on the letters on chakras. But in his personal logbook of sadhana, I think there are only 8 references to chakras. So we have to go to the letters on yoga where the questions on chakras have been raised to understand. Then we need the next question, Vladimir.
Yeah, could you please shed some light on chakras with respect to cellular transformation? As a philosopher psychologist working in the area of dialogic consciousness, I have fair understanding of factors that enhance or inhibit dialogue between divergent ideas. But struggling with autoimmune condition, I struggle with how to calm the civil war between cells in my body. Is cellular transformation far-fetched, or are there ways to work towards it?
When mother's work on body consciousness has been done at a time, or his concept of cellular transformation has come at a time much later than the chakras were formulated. So if you want to relate it with chakras, you can go to the basal chakra, the Muladhara chakra, and in this new way of working with chakras, it is at the level of the Muladhara that you have to start working on the body consciousness, where it is needed. The cellular transformation is needed, because unless you work there, the transformation will not lead to the new species. But remember, this work of transformation of the body, this work of cellular consciousness has been done by the mother much thousands of years later than when the chakras were formulated. At that time, this concept was not there. So you just cannot directly relate that chakras, how to come from the chakras to the cellular consciousness. But to do it, now that Sri Aurobindo has given a new vision, from do it, that you have to, of course, you have to start working on your body consciousness, which is itself is a very big thing. But the body consciousness you have to understand in many different ways. It is not only that. Working, for example, working of the physical ego vis-a-vis the body consciousness. The physical ego is holding the body. It's a mental ego. You can get off the mental ego by rising above your intellectual ideas. You can get over your vital ego by rising above your passions and desires. But how to get above your physical ego, which is holding your physical consciousness? It is very difficult. When the mother was attempting it, she had come to a point where she would not have survived. And then she had to call the force of Shiva to break the physical ego. So to allow the physical consciousness to be worked upon without the presence of the physical ego and without getting disrupted in the absence of the physical ego. Then only she has started the work on the body consciousness in a more dynamic way. So it's a very different subject, but you can lead from the Muladhara chakra, you can lead from there. But then it is something very new which you have to understand in a very different sense. And then afterwards you can see the correspondence that can be there. But it is difficult because, again, I am telling you, this is a very new thing, the cellular consciousness. And when the chakras were given, then the idea was that when you go above, by releasing from the different level of chakras, you actually ignore the lower centers and you are hooked to the higher centers. And you forget the lower centers, because your main work was getting liberated from all the centers to be released into the Brahma. So the approach is totally different.
Yes, so thank you. There is another question here. There are a few more. I will choose some of them. if the divine energy is coming down and working by itself on whichever chakra needs work, is that opposite of us connecting the chakra energy and bring down the light to the center? Is that not opposite of us connecting the chakra energy and bring down the light to that center? I can't
See,
really. Yeah.
is the opposite of connecting. You see, who is connecting? If you are doing it, if you are doing it from the poise of the psychic being, then it is something which is spontaneous, and these are all related with each other, aligned with each other. It has to be an aspiration that has to rise from your psychic being. But if you are wanting to work on the chakra, the force of transformation is coming, and you are wanting to impose your own will, that you want this one to open and that one to open, then that is difficult. It can clash. But you have to actually surrender to the mother, allow her work to be done. And you can have an aspiration that I have a block at this area, let this block be cleared. So you can have an aspiration, but that aspiration has to be there from the level of the psychic being. And the poem can be found in the finding of the soul, in that chapter of Savitri, which is in that canto, which is headed by the words, the finding of the soul.
There is also another poem, The Golden Light, very short poem, but very beautiful one. The golden
Yes.
light came into my brain, into my throat, into my heart. Yeah, that's exactly that way of coming down of Kundalini, Maha Kundalini, as you described it.
It's the most practical poem on consciousness by Aurobindo, where he's talking about, he's talking about the gray matter also. He's not confusing brain and mind and all those things together. He's making them separate. He's talking about the gray matter also, the gray cells of my mind. He's talking about the gray matter. So he is so methodical, so precise, so scientific, that poem.
Yes. There is another question. In the integral paradigm, how does the Kundalini energy work? Thank you for
This
your...
Maha Kundalini. It's not the usual Kundalini that is coming from below upwards. It's the Maha Kundalini, the force of transformation, which is above, which will come down and which will do its work. It's different. It's totally different from the previous way, because this Maha Kundalini was not known before, because Maha Kundalini is the force of transformation that will transform human beings into something greater than human beings. So this is not, you cannot relate it with the old energy that was there when the Kundalini was awakened from below, which was the superconscious that was coiled, came down. Of course, it was the superconscious energy that came down into the inconscious and became coiled there, and it will be released, and then it will be slowly released. But then it is slowly released up one after at one level after another level, and then released according to, in a methodical way. But when it is coming down from above, it is a different paradigm altogether, something different already. What is something which has been already formulated is coming down. So you cannot equate the what in the system that what is coming down with the old order, where it's actually it is a projection of the same energy, but it was coming down in different denouement.
Yes, yeah, thank you. There is another question. Does the force of transformation follow a particular order, from lower to higher, or can we say that evolution of consciousness goes through stages?
The force of transformation, when invoked, will get aligned in you according to your personal needs. So in me, there are certain centers that need to be worked upon first, and in another person, another set of centers that will be worked upon first. So it will be not the same order in everyone. It will be different, but in a way it will be same, that in everybody it will work according to that person's needs. Hatha yogi practices such as mudras and kriya and these and meditation these are the external ways of working on the chakras. I've given that in the you can work on that. But Aurobindo doesn't believe in a geometrical rigidity. He used the word geometrical rigidity. That truth is very plastic and flexible. You can directly work through consciousness also.
There is another question. Is there a known categorical relationship between psychopathologies and chakra blockages or channeling errors?
There are, of course, there are. We have discussed this in our consciousness-based psychology book. We have a separate section for these things. At every level, there can be difficulties at every level. So there are difficulties when you are between the inner being and the outer being. Now, when the chakras are being opened, the chakras are connections between the inner being and the outer being. And then half open and half work is half done. And then you get fixed in the intermediate zone. Sri Aurobindo called it the intermediate zone between the inner being and the outer being, where you can be prone to many psychopathologies, like even hallucinations and delusions and all that. And then what happens when the chakras are not are opening in a skewed way? The inner being can progress very fast, but the outer being doesn't progress fast because their connection is not very smooth. Then the outer being will not follow the inner being, and outer being can become ill in a very different way. One can have great illnesses. That's how the big yogis have great illnesses. Sometimes great yogis have big illnesses because the inner being progresses very fast and the outer being cannot follow suit, because the connections between the inner being and the outer being, there is something that is going on there which is a skewed connection. So all that, there are many different levels. Psychopathologies can occur at very different levels. We have discussed all these different levels, and in our book, there is a separate section on it. When it comes out, we'll see.
Thank you. There's the last question. Although we are working on the upper chakras, but the root chakra pulls down the energies and again puts us into the unfavorable situations, where may be some unlearned lesson opens up. Does this happen? And how can we deal with it?
It's not only the root chakra. The root chakra, if you see below the root chakra, the problems arise below the root chakra from the inconscious. And the subconscious and the inconscious, there are the chakras. But the forces that can come up and can start disrupting from the level of the root chakras. That is why we said that when you are working on the lowest chakra, you must practice at times to project the light into the subconscious, project the light into the inconscious. You will not be able to project much. After some time, it will be swallowed up by the darkness arising from there. And you can only progress up to a certain point. After a certain point, your progress might be hampered. Actually, it will be hampered, as Sri Aurobindo explains, that unless one reaches the supermind, a complete conquest on the inconscious or on the forces that drag you down cannot be there. There is always a risk that you can be pulled down. Even the level of the overmind, the level of the gods can pull you down. So you see that always everything is risky. At every time you have to be dependent on the grace.
Thank you very much for your enlightening and very rich presentation. I think we learned a lot today from this presentation, how it is viewed in Sri Aurobindo's light, and why this descent from above was kind of forgotten or was neglected or not seen anymore in post-Vedic tradition, especially because in the Vedas they are always calling to come down for the gods. There is fire which is calling to the gods to bring them down. There's always this movement down. And I think that was why Sri Aurobindo looked into the Vedas and studied them, because he wanted to bring this grand yoga back to its fulfillment of transformation of nature. It's a beautiful exposition. Thank you, Soumitra, once again.
Yes, I would like to thank you too, Dr. Basu. And I don't know if you've had a chance to kind of see some of the chats, but many attendees thanking you for the clarification and for your wonderful talk. And we too are very appreciative. And just one very quick announcement before folks leave. Next Saturday, October 2nd, New Perspectives will be hosting James Anderson from Namaha, who will offer an experiential session on how to enhance your immunity. And all of you can register for this New Perspectives event by visiting our homepage, which I've put in the chat box, lagrosscenter.com. And we hope to see you there. And all recordings, including Dr. Basu's today on chakras, will also can be found on our website. Thank you all once again, and thank you, Dr. Basu. Very much appreciative. Thank you. Namaste to all.